When I was a boy, I used to go with my papa when he went fishing at the lake. He had the fishing license and permit, so I used to watch and help with the bait when needed. It was both peaceful and exciting, watching the ripples on the water. But one day, during a lull, I really did say to my papa, "What did you do during the war, Daddy?"
What do you think I did? I was a soldier, obeyed orders. Eastern Front. Now, give me the hooks and the bait.
I took what he said and we continued fishing. I didn't think further about it. I was a child of the post-war boom. I went to school and my father went every day to the abattoir where they used the most modern methods to stun the animal. We were good citizens. The teachers educated me, although occasionally, as I grew older, I heard the word re-education among the teachers when they didn't know I was listening. It puzzled me because how could I be re-educated when I was being educated for the first time? Then, in the late 1950s, a film came out, The Diary of Anne Frank, about a little German girl who had fled to Holland with her family during the war. It didn't entirely square with what we'd been taught in social studies. But one day, the teacher introduced the history of our town, how we citizens had suffered at the end of the war, but were lucky that the Americans got to us before the Soviets. And then suddenly, Karl cheaped the teacher. We were amazed.
What about the political prisoners like my father and the concentration camps? They weren't all in Poland. There were many camps in Germany. There was one near here. Everyone knew.
The teacher, who was in her 50s, flushed and adjusted her glasses. I waited for her answer, but she never answered. Simply said, "Thank you for your contribution, Karl," and carried on as if he'd never spoken. Karl leaned back in his chair and pursed his lips, and nothing more was said. I regret now that I never talked to Karl. We all thought he was an oddball. The book, written by the girl who went to Holland, was a bestseller after the movie came out, but it never turned up in our house. A slight feeling of unease entered my comfortable life. I began to realize the Americans who brought us such prosperity were there because of what happened during the war, which we lost. It wasn't what was said, it was what wasn't said. I was interested in history and architecture, and I wanted to know about the town's families, their trades and houses. So I went to the library and archives to look at maps and plans, and then I asked my father. He was genial.
Well, the Schmidt family always ran the laundry business, and the Mullers were wine merchants.
Well, who lived next door, Papa, in the house with the big backyard?
Oh, they didn't stay long.
What do you mean? Then who did stay there long?
It's not worth talking about. No, I knew them a bit. I met one of them when I was a soldier, but...
He bit his lip. My papa bit his lip. And then he said,
Never mind.
My papa never broke off his sentences like that. What went on next door? Even the archivists were tight-lipped. Like Karl, but he pursed his lips after he had spoken. They pursed their lips the minute they heard my request. I searched through the old address books and the birth, marriage, and death registers. They were in the address books, Kramer, grain merchants. But they weren't in the registers of the Evangelist Church. Finally, a lady archivist slipped me a note directing me to the retired postmaster.
The registers of the Jewish church.
Jewish? like Anne Frank.
Here you are. Kramer family, then. They had lived in that house since at least 1750.
1750? With that one date, my trust in my papa was shattered. He must have known them. Our family had lived in our house for generations as well. Are they buried here? Where is the cemetery?
It's where the factory is now. They filed down the gravestones and used them for some of the paving leading to the entrance.
I never noticed on the maps. I wasn't looking for a Jewish cemetery, just for the houses and landmarks I knew. And then I grasped at another date, 1902, my father's birth date. Were any of the Kramer family born around 1902?
1900. Gerhard. Klaus, 1902. Ilse was his twin.
At that point, I couldn't hear anymore. I fled, stunned. I needed out in case the old postmaster told me when and where they died. My papa would become not only a liar, there it has to be said, not only a liar, but something more. Well, I couldn't leave it. We lived in the same house. We saw each other over breakfast, lunch, dinner. When I refused to go on the next fishing trip, he paused and looked at me, but he didn't say anything. Had the old postmaster told him anything? Or did he guess? Or did he think it was a teenage mood? I resolved to go on one more fishing trip. He was very quiet and busied himself with setting up the rod and sat on his stool. And then, Papa?
Yes, Martin?
You must have known them. They were your age. Gerhard and Ilse and Klaus.
They was rich. They could have. They should have gone to America.
Stop. They weren't any richer or poorer than your family. You went to school with them. And they tried for visas. The old postmaster told me. He was inscrutable, the postmaster. He had known everyone, and for some reason he wasn't afraid. Yes, he wasn't afraid to tell me.
I wasn't here when they was taken away. I was on the Eastern Front.
And their house was quickly occupied, helped by neighbours who'd grown up with them. At that point, he visibly shrank. My hulking abattoir worker of a father visibly shrank before my eyes. And then he said,
I didn't take part.
how can I believe you? You did take part. Even if you didn't, you participated. You knew it was happening. Even if you weren't there, you helped kill Anne Frank. He put down his rod and looked at me with his grey-green eyes.
I did see him once more. Klaus. Out east. He was a slave labourer on a death march. He recognised me before I recognised him. Not even skin, just bones.
He continued, sturdy and determined. It was me who collapsed on the ground. You met him? Oh, what pleasantries passed your lips? Oh, how are you, Klaus? Family well? You're looking well yourself.
He said, hello, Ernst. And I said, Hello. I thought of giving him my spare pair of gloves, but I was afraid someone would see me. And then he said, please tell me the neighbours are looking after my mum and dad and Gerhard and Ilse. I just looked at the ground and someone pushed him forward away from me, and I just continued looking at the ground until I thought he'd be gone. And when I looked up, he was gone.
So that was my father's guilty secret. He told me later he hadn't felt guilty then, though. He just accepted it. It was the way of the world, the way of the Eastern Front. I was angry and frustrated, but I didn't know what to do. Only later, the last days, he pitied himself that his best friends, blood brothers, and his sweetheart had been taken away from him. After a few years, I left to go to college. I spent a year in the US on a student exchange. Occasionally, I went home, past the house next door, broke bread with my parents. Was it his only direct contact with the terrible things that unfolded? I honestly don't know. There's no paper trail to connect it. After he died, we found an old photo of Papa. His arm around a girl's waist, and two boys about his age, all in bathing costumes, laughing by a local lake. The names Ernst, Klaus, Ilse, and Gerhard carefully inscribed on the back. Neighbours.